placement groups are nothing but if you have a group of servers and you want those group of servers to talk to each other with low latency and very high bandwidth, then you create something called network placement groups and put all your servers in your network placement groups. So as the image that you see here shows, all the servers are able to reach each other and all of them will have a 10 Gbps network connection. To achieve this, there are some minimum conditions. For example, one of the conditions is not all instance types are supported. Only the latest variants of the instance generations are supported, and instance types have to be having the network bandwidth is also a minimum requirement. For example, when you choose an instance type, it comes with a predefined network bandwidth of 10 Gbps or 20 Gbps or 5 Gbps. So only those instances which have a minimum of 10 Gbps or are having higher bandwidth can be added to a placement group. And another limitation is placement groups cannot span across availability zones. So if you want to have a low latency, high bandwidth requirement, you need to have two placement groups, one for each availability zone. And likewise, you cannot move an instance into a placement group. For example, you started an instance and you find that that instance also needs to be a placement inside a placement group. You cannot attach it or move it inside the placement group. You need to create an AMI and then start it inside the placement group. So there are some limitations, but the important thing that needs to be understood is placement groups will have a very low latency and they will have a very high bandwidth between them if appropriately configured with the right instances. And this is very, very important when you have a large organization, when a lot of servers or your application servers or internal website are going to be served to your internal employees only, then it might be efficient to put them all inside a placement group. So there is a very nice documentation Amazon has provided in the placement on the topic of placement group. So if you go to this URL that that I shared with you, and you should be able to see that now anytime. It details more about the placement group and also the limitations as well. There we go. So this is the Amazon documentation for placement group, and as you can see here, it is a low latency, high speed, high packet per second network performance for your placement group. And if you just scroll down a little bit, you can find out the placement group limitations as well. And there are a lot of limitations there. You should be very careful on setting up your placement group, or before starting to decide starting to create your placement group, you need to go over the limitations and design it appropriately. And when it comes to design the placement groups, there is not much to do other than going to the console and clicking on the placement group. Let us look at that now. If I have already logged into my EC2 dashboard, let me just open that. And when you see on the left hand side, there is under network and security, you have an option called a placement group. If you click on that, it opens the EC2 dashboard for placement groups, and all you have to do is click on this placement group and type in the name that you want. This name has to be unique within your account. You cannot have multiple placement groups with the same name. So this is all there it is to do there, and whenever you are starting an instance, you just have to ensure that you are choosing this group placement group option when you're starting an instance. So automatically, if it is a C2 or C4 or M4 instance, and if they are inside a placement group, all of them will have a bandwidth of 10 Gbps or 20 Gbps. And the interesting restriction is if two servers are having different bandwidth, the maximum throughput that you will achieve is the slower of the two servers. Say for example, server A is having 10 Gbps and server B is having 20 Gbps. The maximum throughput that you will achieve is 10 Gbps. And you should also configure the applications to talk to each other through the IP4 network, that is a private IP, not the public IP. If you are allowing them to talk to them in the public IP, the bandwidth might come down to 5 Gbps. All of these things that I'm saying are all listed in the limitations that you find it in the public page, and go over that, make yourself familiar with some of those things, and it is helpful for designing your infrastructure.